Let's talk about Coco Chanel today. She's nobody I need to introduce to you. I would like to share 7 basic fashion facts about the designer. My name is Liz, I'm a fashion and art historian, and on this channel I'm telling you the stories behind fashion trends. So let's dive right in. Let's start with fashion fact number 1. Coco Chanel did not start with a big collection of garments as a fashion designer. She actually focused on one product only, and this product was hats. Hats at the time made sense because they were an important part of the female wardrobe, and soon she could establish her name in the field, and many ladies who she socialized with were wearing her creations. Coco Chanel started out during the so-called Belle Époque in France, which was a time period from about 1880 until the First World War. And the fashion of the time was very flamboyant, especially the hats. They were very big, they were heavily decorated, very often in bright colors. For the decorations they used things like silk flowers, for example, and Coco Chanel did something different with the hats. She reduced the design, so there was less decoration on it. There was also a special way to wear them at a certain angle, and this already shows where Coco Chanel would go in the long run with her fashion business. Because in the long run she would always say, I want to create clothes for women that look elegant and chic, but at the same time I want them to be able to move freely. And this already started with the hats. And from the very early beginning onwards, already with her hats, Coco Chanel basically designed for herself. We have to put this in the overall context. This was the time of the suffragette movement. Women across Europe asked for more rights. They eventually gained the right to vote in many European countries. And Coco Chanel was a woman who did things differently. She did things that were not supposed to be done by women. For example, she had male friends and went on hunting expeditions in the UK. She also went horseback riding, and she dared to wear pants and not sit on the side with a dress or a skirt. All of this was not done by women. And also the way she led her life. She had a long-term relationship with Etienne Balsan at the time, and they lived together even though they were not married. So all of this reflected a kind of woman who also needed clothes that looked different. On the one hand, to let her move freely, but also, in my opinion, to send a statement that she was a different type of woman. We could even say that Coco Chanel led the life of a man. She did what she wanted to do. She was interested in things that usually only men do. She also had her own career. And of course, this also led to the fact that she very often was inspired by menswear. Similar to what I said in my video about Yves Saint Laurent, she took men's garments and then adapted them for the needs of women. So this is also something that we need to take into account throughout her career, not only with the hats, but also with the garments later on. And exactly this inspiration by menswear leads me to fact number 2, the famous Chanel suit. Chanel started to experiment with suits already in the 1920s. They had a very low waist, but already this relaxed fit. But the suits became very famous after she reopened her house in 1954. She attracted the attention of American buyers with these simple designs, and until 1957 she refined the suits, and she then came up with this signature design that we know until today for the Chanel suits. So these suits were very much straight cut. The jacket was straight cut, also the skirt was straight cut, and at the time this was something quite innovative because this was still a time when Christian Dior's new look with the structured and feminine look was very popular. And as you may know, Gabrielle Chanel detested the corset. She wanted to free the women from the corset, and this is exactly what she did with these designs. And there's one nice design detail here also, because Coco Chanel always paired the inner lining of her jackets with the blouses. These blouses were usually sleeveless, and then they had the same material and color as the lining. And she used to sometimes roll up the sleeves to show the lining and the blouse that they matched, or she also added faux cuffs. As I mentioned before, for Gabrielle Chanel it was very important to, on the one hand, look good, but at the same time also be able to move freely. And this is exactly what she also did with her suits. What is important to know is that she designed directly on the women's body. She did not sketch and then make patterns and then construct the garment, and this direct design on the body allowed her to analyze how women moved. And this resulted in higher armholes for the jackets, so this allowed the women more flexibility when moving. And also these jackets rather look like cardigans. They have a very straight cut, so again this is this move away from the corset, from these very structured and very uncomfortable and impractical designs. Furthermore, she also added zips, very often two, onto her skirts to make sure that these skirts fit well. The signature design of her suits have stayed pretty much the same until today. Their signature trimmings on the pockets, for example, are in the same color as, for example, the neckline or the cuffs. She also used her signature buttons, and usually her neckline was a collarless neckline because her credo was that this would make the neck of the wearer longer. For Chanel, functionality was as important as elegance or the look of her garments. She famously said, "No button without a buttonhole." And also she created pockets that were real pockets, so she didn't believe in these mere decorative effects. This also helped the wearer to adopt this typical Chanel way of walking, where you put one hand into your pocket and the hips moved forward, which was considered a very cool and chic way of walking. Coco Chanel created suits out of a range of materials, for example, jersey, linen or tweed, and she's probably most famous for tweed. She discovered her passion for the material in Britain because she actually did not invent the tweed suit for women. This was something that British women wore, for example, hunting expeditions, because tweed is a very durable and resistant material. It also lets you blend into the landscape because of the natural colors. But what Coco Chanel did is she took this garment from the countryside, which was nothing really fashionable, and turned it into something elegant and chic. Tweed also stands for her long relationship with Britain, because she had a lot of friends from British upper class, for example Winston Churchill. She also had a long relationship with the Duke of Westminster, and because of these relationships she on the one hand could find new suppliers, for example tweed mills in the UK, but she also managed to tap into a new market because she understood what social activities upper class women in the UK attended at the time, and also which garments were necessary for those. And very soon the suits became very popular. Today they have become classics, and many people associate the suits with the black designs, but she actually created them in many different colors. And needless to say, not everybody could afford a real Chanel suit, so fashion magazines very soon started publishing patterns to make the suit yourself. There were also many companies that sold copies of the Chanel suit, and she was also asked if she was worried about all these copies, but then she simply answered if she was worried about being copied, she would admit that she didn't have any new ideas or creativity left. So I think she was not really bothered, and actually on the contrary, I think these copies contributed to the myth of the Chanel suit. On the one hand, you can have the imitation, but eventually maybe one day you can afford the real Chanel suit. And in the 1960s, Chanel suits had become so popular that American Vogue actually compared them to the Ford cars, because they predicted that the Chanel suit had created basically a kind of uniform for everyone, just like everyone wanted to drive a Ford car. And this brings me to fact number 3, the little black dress. In 1919, Paris was a lively place again because the peace conference was held in the city and many international delegates came there. At the same time, shortages were part of daily life, and Chanel incorporated this dichotomy into her designs. She created black dresses that were relatively simple and also relatively short, and what was special about them is that you could wear them on the one hand in the evening, or you could wear them under a manteau during the afternoon. Today it is a bit difficult to imagine that a simple black dress was something that special, but it actually was. We have to put it into the overall fashion history context. The fashion at the time for women, as I said, was very impractical. You had to wear a corset. Also, you could not wear the same outfit in the afternoon, for example, and then in the evening. And also you relied on help. These garments were very, very complicated to wear and also to put on. Now Chanel not only made do of the shortages, but she also created something that let women move more freely. She also helped them to not have to think about what they had to wear, because this was one dress that you had to get and then you could dress it up or down and you could wear it for multiple occasions and you could put it on yourself. You didn't rely on anybody else. So in the context of fashion history, this little black dress was quite innovative. And these dresses from 1919 then evolved and later became known as the little black dress. The prototype is probably a dress model 817 from Crêpe de Chine in black. And again, not only the dress itself, but also using black was very daring and innovative at the time, because black was the color for mourning, for work, for sales assistants. It was definitely not something that you would wear to an evening out with your friends. But Coco Chanel managed to take black and turn it into something elegant and chic, and she actually said she liked using black because it accentuated the silhouette that she created and also the simple lines of her garments. Let's move on to fashion fact number 4, the shoes. In 1957, Chanel approached multiple shoemakers in Paris, and she ended up in a collaboration with Massaro, and she wanted to simplify shoes for women because the situation was the following. If you bought an haute couture garment, you took this garment, showed it to your shoemaker, and then he made one pair of shoes for this garment, and then you probably ended up wearing it maybe once. Chanel wanted to simplify this process and also make shoes more versatile. So she came up with the two-tone shoe, which is very famous until today. This shoe was made from beige leather because the beige color elongated the leg. And then she put a black cap on the toes. And this cap not only protects the shoe from dirt, but also shortens the feet. So you achieve a more dramatic silhouette. And these shoes had heels that were just high enough that you could walk elegantly, but at the same time they shouldn't be uncomfortable. And until today, the two-tone shoe is one of the best sellers for the brand Chanel. You have probably all waited for fashion fact number 5, the famous Chanel bag. In 1954, Coco Chanel wanted to simplify bags because, again, these items were very cumbersome. Women had to carry them in their hand, they could not move freely, they couldn't carry many items in them. So Coco Chanel came up with a design that was inspired by equestrian equipment, hence the quilted design that we know until today. Also, the bag came with multiple compartments, for example, a lipstick compartment, and what was very innovative was the chain straps. These chain straps were interwoven with leather, so you could carry them on your shoulder, and it allowed freedom of movement, and you didn't have to worry anymore how to hold your bag. At the same time, the chain had a decorative effect because we know that Coco Chanel loved her jewelry, so we could even say that this bag was a piece of jewelry itself. And this is the famous 255 bag, and the name comes from the date when it was created in February 1955. It reflects Coco Chanel's passion for number titles, and one detail that I would like to share here, the signature Chanel logo was not on the original 255 bag. This only was added under Karl Lagerfeld. Fashion fact number 6 is about the Chanel jewelry, and as I mentioned before, she loved to pair her simple designs with opulent jewelry. On the one hand, she wore real gemstones or real pearls, but she also mixed them with imitation stones and imitation pearls, and she popularized this amongst her clientele. And very soon she started to produce her own custom jewelry. She partnered with houses in Paris, for example, the Maison Crépois. They produced, for example, glass stones with a rounded 3D effect in many different colors, and many of the iconic Chanel jewelry designs were made by Maison Crépois. And her costume jewelry became so popular that later on many magazines and experts actually attribute the rise of costume jewelry to Coco Chanel, and she actually lifted it from being a simple imitation to its own craft and its own technique and style. Coco Chanel not only designed costume jewelry, she also moved into fine jewelry, and she was approached by the London Diamond Corporation in 1932 to create diamond designs. Again, we need some historical context here. This was the time of the Great Depression when wearing diamonds was considered as eccentric, and they needed somebody like Coco Chanel to popularize diamonds again. She actually said she didn't find diamonds eccentric, she found them a good investment, and then she came up with different designs, for example, stars, or also things that she used in haute couture like feathers, for example. And the stones were set in clusters, they were of similar size, and they could be reset easily. She presented her collection at her own apartment, and it was very popular, and reportedly the stock of De Beers jumped up 20 points in the aftermath of this exhibition. In general, for her designs, whether it's costume jewelry or fine jewelry, Chanel was inspired either by her own travels or also by museum visits, and similar to Karl Lagerfeld, she was inspired by many different regions of the world. And now we have arrived at the last fashion fact, the Chanel total look. It is very interesting to see that Coco Chanel started out with only one product, one accessory, the hat, and then created an empire where she basically sold you a Chanel total look, which means you start with the garment, for example a dress, and then you can buy the jewelry, the matching bag, the matching shoes, everything in her boutique to achieve this Chanel total look. She also created other accessories such as gloves or scarves, and she laid a groundwork for so many other luxury brands that copied that model. As you can see, Coco Chanel's design legacy is very big, and these were only 7 basic fashion facts that I wanted to share with you. I would like to know, what do you think about them, or do you have any further fashion facts you would like to share? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also head over to thepinklookbook.com for more fashion related articles, and don't forget to check out my fashion brand Pelagona. And if you like this video, I'm sure you will also enjoy my other video about the current Coco Chanel exhibition at the V&A in London. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon.